Good morning, everybody. You guys, I cannot thank you enough for the recent push of support. I'm not topping any charts by any means, obviously, but still, it's wonderful to see. To the few who have been here from the beginning, and everyone who has joined along the way, I still can't believe how much I enjoy putting these together, and to have you all along for the ride is just that much sweeter. I start my new job next week with one of my best friends, and I couldn't be more excited. I probably said this already, but the new place has I think they call it a Murphy bookshelf. Basically a moving bookshelf door as part of their Prohibition era theme, and it is so cool. I've only ever seen one before. My neighbor years ago, back in Minnesota, he grew massive amounts of weed, and to get into his grow room, you had to swing open this bookshelf. It was amazing to see, but then he went to jail, and I never saw it again. I wonder, while I was writing this, I wondered if H.H. Holmes had any of those in his murder mansion, mystery hotel maze. I like to think so. However, our story today takes place centuries before Chicago was even a speck on a map. Today, I bring you the story of how one woman became Rome's deadliest poisoner. My name is Eli, and this is Murder in the Morning. My sources for today come from Crime Reads, mainly Crime Reads and All That's Interesting, and the other one or two I'll put down below. Born in the 1st century of CE, current era, in the countryside of Gaul, which is modern-day France, Locusta, no last name, grew up one with nature, learning about herbs and botany essentially as soon as she could walk. Gaul, and that's spelled Gaul, according to study.com, was a territory in and around modern-day France. It extended across the Alps into the Po Valley in northern Italy and ran west along the Mediterranean coast down to the Pyrenees. During this time, it was the Celtic people who were spreading throughout Europe during the Late Bronze Age and the Iron Age, and the Gauls were the Celtic tribes that settled in this area. They were known for their ferocious warriors, intricate art, and the religious practices carried out by druids, which is essentially a high-ranking priest or priestess. The Gaelic warriors led the tribes and allowed them to conquer and assimilate the peoples who had been living in the regions previously. Then, the Romans conquered the Gauls in 51 BCE and Romanized them, spreading their traditions throughout the territory. As the Roman Empire fell to various invasions, the Gauls were eventually overtaken by the Franks, who eventually established the Kingdom of the Franks, or France, as we know it today. Anywho, bit of history, Locusta, and I swear I looked for her last name, could not find one. She was seemingly well educated by the time she reached adulthood, ripe with social skills and bountiful knowledge of the earth below her. It's not known exactly how she came to be in Rome. One site said she moved there on her own accord, and another said, quote, it's possible she was taken captive as a slave. A century earlier, Julius Caesar's campaign in Gaul had netted as many as 1 million slaves for the empire, end quote. Either way, upon her arrival, she brought her expertise of poison with her. In the massive, dangerous, dirty, and greedy city of Rome, she realized the quickest way to make a buck was by selling poison. According to Crime Reads, in a city where greed and ambition were rampant, and everyone had plenty of enemies, she found no shortage of customers. However, quick sales did not mean she was safe from the law. Locusta was soon imprisoned, and may have even died an early death had word of her skills not reached Empress Agrippina the Younger. In 54 CE, Agrippina plotted to murder her husband, Claudius, to ensure her son, Nero, inherited the throne. and so she employed Locusta. Empress Agrippina requested the poison be, quote, some rare compound which might derange his mind and delay death, end quote, to help soften any suspicions. Locusta complied and created a poison to sprinkle over Claudius's mushrooms. The plan worked. With Claudius dead, Agrippina had cemented Nero's place on the throne. Eerily similar to a Game of Thrones plot in season 2 or 3, I believe. Not much is known about her in the subsequent years after poisoning Claudius. She fades back into the crowded streets of Rome, selling poison again to anyone willing to buy it. Anyone that wanted to kill somebody else. In the meantime, poison itself had become both kingmaker and kingkiller. The sheer use of poison across the land had made powerful people everywhere very nervous. But what kind of poisons did they use hundreds, thousands of years ago? According to the University College London, quote, our knowledge of poisons available during Roman times is derived from many old writings. Poisons were of vegetable, animal, and mineral origin. Animal poisons were not well studied in ancient times and included cantharidin as well as such unlikely, quote, poisons as bull's blood, toads, and salamanders. Poisonous insects, snakes, spiders, and scorpions were known but rarely used in homicide. Mineral poisons, for example, salts of lead, mercury, copper, arsenic, and antimony, were known but virtually never used. Fumes in lead, silver, and gold mines were recognized as toxic, but again, hardly ever used. Vegetable poisons were best known and most frequently used. They included plants with belladonna alkaloids, for example, henbane, datura, deadly nightshade, and mandrake. Aconite from monkshood, hemlock, hellebore, colchium, yew extract, and opium were also among these plants used. Strychnine was unknown to the Romans, and there's no evidence that cyanide was extracted from kernels of certain fruits either. Historians rarely mentioned specific poisons used when describing incidents of poisoning. However, we know that hemlock and honey was the poison favored by Canidia, and that Seneca drank the hemlock, and the British king Cadovulcus committed suicide with yew extract. Claudius, from our story, died after eating poisoned mushrooms, and a strong case is made out that aconite was used in his killing. The ancients apparently could not distinguish confidently between edible and toxic mushrooms, and professional poisoners often tested the potency of their mixtures, probably containing multiple toxins, on animals, slaves, or convicts, end quote. According to All That's Interesting, the Roman imperial court earned such a strong reputation for using poison that many relied on tasters or worried daily about their food. Afraid that someone would strike him down, even Nero carried a deadly poison to commit suicide with, rather than die violently by a slow-acting concoction. As time went on, Nero even became wary of his stepbrother, Britannicus, afraid that he would attempt to steal the throne. And so, enter Locusta. Poison had placed Nero on the throne, and poison would keep him there. Do you think the website Britannica is named after Britannicus? Or just like Britain? Quote, the murder took significant skill. Poison could not simply be poured into his food or drink, as everything was sampled by a food tester. If the poison was quick-acting, the tester would die almost instantly, leaving his employer unharmed. If the poison was slow-acting, the fact that both the food tester and his employer became sick could serve as proof that he had been poisoned, casting suspicion upon the killer. Both of these instances needed to be avoided. So, at a party, Britannicus was presented with a goblet of wine that was extremely hot, but utterly harmless. The food tester tried it and emerged unharmed. But when Britannicus took a drink, He quickly began gasping and was, quote, speechless until he stopped breathing. The poison was not in the wine. It was in the carafe of cold water that Britannicus used to lower the temperature of his wine. I don't understand why they served hot wine and then would add cold water to it. There's probably a whole explanation, but it's weird. Anyways, the poison was in that carafe of cold water after the tester had already tested it. As he died in front of this party, gasping for his last breath, Nero told everyone calmly that his brother often suffered from such epileptic fits. End quote. For her services, Locusta was pardoned for her crimes and bestowed with beautiful estates and servants. She was even gifted a school where she taught her students all about poisons and poisoning people. Nero even named her official chief poisoner or the Imperial Poisoner. In the years that followed, Nero would become known as one of the most violent rulers, using Locusta as a weapon against his enemies. Eventually, the citizens revolted against his tyranny and the Senate condemned his actions. And in 68 CE, as his kingdom collapsed, Nero committed suicide before facing justice. Quote, Locusta did not have time to flee before Nero's successor, Emperor Galba, sent men to arrest her. Galba rounded up as many of Nero's closest associates, including the Imperial Poisoner. As punishment for her crimes, Locusta was hauled through the streets of Rome. Then she was publicly executed. End quote. According to All That's Interesting, Locusta's very existence was highly debated. Some say she did what she had to do to survive. Locusta may have had very few choices but to agree when an empress and an emperor demanded her services. On the other hand, some see her as a cold-blooded killer and opportunist, killing at will and perfecting poison on innocent slaves. Quote, after her death, many Roman historians condemned Locusta, but did she even commit the dark acts recorded in some of these writings? In the 1st century, Roman historians tore apart emperors like Nero and Caligula. Oh no. They held up these emperors as the antithesis of Roman values. Tales of Nero poisoning his enemies made him look like a coward. Poison, seen at the time as a woman's weapon, was not the tool Roman men used to confront their rivals. Locusta's very existence became a way for Nero's enemies to criticize him. Did they exaggerate Locusta's brutality to make Nero look even worse? Or was she indeed one of the earliest serial killers? Like so many other historical mysteries, we may never know the truth. And that, my friends, is the story of Rome's Imperial Poisoner, Locusta of Gaul. I hope you enjoyed today's, brief episode. I'm sorry, I guess I just didn't have it in me as much while writing that one. But again, thank you for taking the time to listen in today. And if you'd like, stick around for a bit extra after the music. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Okay. Keep your eyes on the prize during this short story, titled Baby's Eyes Were Bouncing After Being Picked Up from Daycare, written by Liam Quinn of People.com. Quote, a Minnesota daycare provider was sentenced to more than 7 years in prison after she assaulted a 6-month-old in her care last October. Michelle Holt, or Holty, who's 59, previously pleaded guilty to 1 count of assault in connection to the October 2023 incident. Police in Champlin, Minnesota began investigating the assault after the parents of the baby picked him up from Holty's daycare and discovered that his eyes were turned to the left and then remained closed during the ride home. While taking the victim out of his car seat after arriving home, the father discovered that he would not turn his head straight, and that his eyes were bouncing while still veering left. The victim's limbs were flexed and did not feel normal, so the parents took him to the hospital. Police say the child suffered a hematoma and was put in a medically induced coma. The child also needed to have part of his skull removed to reduce brain swelling. When first questioned by the child's mother, according to the probable cause statement, Holte said that another child at the daycare had dropped the baby before telling police the same story. The baby's doctor told police that Holte's claim did not explain the injuries. Police then interviewed the child that she accused of dropping the baby, who, using a doll, demonstrated that Holte had actually dropped the victim. She was subsequently arrested and eventually told police that she tossed the baby and put him down, quote, a little harder than normal, end quote. After picking the victim up, Holte told police she noticed he wasn't focusing and that his eyes were slanted. She then admitted, the report states, that she had worked in childcare for a long time and became frustrated, which led her to a breaking point. Holte ended up pleading guilty to first-degree assault, causing great bodily harm, and was sentenced to 91 months in prison on May 24th. This is every parent's worst nightmare, and had been the absolute worst 7 months of our lives, said the boy's mother, Lisa Sapp, end quote. I wonder if there's a difference between first-degree assault and then first-degree assault to an infant. I mean, she could have killed the poor little boy. What the frick? Not a good look, Minnesota. Not a good look. Oh boy, that was a really short one today, huh? Unfortunately, that is all I have written down. That's all I got for you wonderful, wonderful people. Oh, the pool that everyone in this apartment complex has been paying for 2 years, that has been empty and under construction, is finally getting worked on today. So maybe I'll fucking go look at that. All right. Thank you all again for the support. Honestly, it means a lot. It means a lot. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you on Monday. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Love you.